Well, hi, everybody. It's Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate, the Hansen Ohana. I'm broadcasting on the KAOI radio group, 1110 AM. That also broadcasts on 96.7 FM, 98.7 FM, and our friends on the west side of Maui here at 95.5 FM. I've got two very special guests with me today. I have Rita Chin from Fidelity National Title to talk about some local stats in the real estate market specifically, and of course, everybody's favorite state economist, Paul Brewbaker. Paul Brewbaker is the principal of TZ Economics, a Hawaii economics consultancy, and he has done a lot of background research for the Hawaii economy for financial risk analytics, which stems from his 25-year affiliation with Bank of Hawaii. He's also a graduate of Stanford University. He did graduate work at the University of Wisconsin and got his PhD in economics from the University of Hawaii. So, and he's of course a part of a large number of other forums and points of communication as well. Thank you, Paul, so much for joining us. Thank you, Rita. I appreciate you guys both being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
I know.
My pleasure. So I wanted to, of course, talk today. Today's of specific importance. We have a crisis, and I actually haven't done a radio show since March because things are shifting and changing all the time. So I've been doing a lot of my more informative shows and playing those so that people get an understanding of just real estate in general. But things are evolving and changing so rapidly, it's kind of hard to get a grip on what's happening. And I mean, today is of, again, specific importance because Maui has hit 20 infections. And they have said if we get an average of 10 over a course of 5 days, we're going to do a partial shutdown of the island because we just have limited capacity in our hospitals. I think there's maybe enough capacity for Maui Memorial for something like 10 or 15 specific beds. And it's not the number of beds, it's really the resources, ventilators, trained staff to basically take care of these people. We're actually seeing these numbers increase in some local locations. We're actually having these clusters of infections. So in order to stem that, it makes logical sense to shut things down. The order hasn't come yet. We have been opening up, but lots of people aren't adhering to the rules of mask wearing. Mostly, at least I've been viewing it in more the 30 and 40 and under kind of crowd that are going and having parties, going over to a friend's house. And a lot of these people, they don't really have to worry about the asymptomatics of COVID. They're going to be okay, and they're not really worried. The problem is they're spreading it, and they're going to eventually cause a shutdown. Of course, everybody is, responsible for how we bear this burden. But right now, that's where we're seeing a lot of the outbreaks. And I wanted to first start off by Paul. Can you tell us a little bit more about how we've reacted to the economic shutdown here in Hawaii and economics in general?
Well, of course, the underlying driver of everything that's happened since February is the coronavirus itself. And for Hawaii, there are really two dimensions of that. The first is the garden variety economic response, behavioral response to the increase in uncertainty and risk posed by the particular characteristics of the novel coronavirus, which are that it is highly infectious and that it'll kill you in numbers that we don't ordinarily associate with the kinds of infectious diseases that we confront in our daily lives. And those two characteristics together pose a risk that for individuals means that they personally or on behalf of their families tend to go into kind of a bunker mentality. And so we can see this now. We have all this amazing data now that shows that people went out and bought toilet paper and canned goods, they stocked up, and then they went into the cave, and then they shut down for a few months. And by the way, this all happened before the stay-at-home order. People stopped traveling before the 14-day quarantine. So I'm talking about endogenous autonomous reductions in consumption, or the flip side, an increase in the savings rate, ironically, as we all hunker down. Now, to be sure, because of the economic consequences of people reducing their consumption and more generally, in the case of Hawaii, reducing travel demand as a high-end or sort of luxury consumable, we got hit in Hawaii with the double whammy of, they say, the garden variety consumption decline, and then a complete loss of our primary export, about 30% of the economy for the neighbor islands. For a place like Maui, maybe even 40% of economic activity. And so it would have been bad enough if people just stayed at home and didn't go out to eat, but they did that plus 40% of the economy went away, or 30% of the economy. And that's why we're reeling the way we are. Now, it's notable that if you look at asset markets like the stock market or residential real estate, there is a form of resilience that tells us that as investors look across the chasm, to the other end of where we'll arrive, where enough of us are willing to get vaccinated so that the free rider anti-vaxxer guys don't have to, that we can restore the economic activity that we left off abruptly in the middle of winter. We just turned it off. And
from my understanding too, the number of people who are anti-vaxxer are very, 10 to 15%, and you typically need about 70% in order to get herd immunity. So there wouldn't necessarily be a need to obligate people, but once we get adoption of the vaccine, hopefully this will stem the tide, and we'll be able to see, the economy return to more.
Well, we'll see. I don't know if you ought to get vaccinated to go to school. But I'm just saying these are questions that we'll confront when a vaccine is available. And all I'm saying is that between now and a vaccine, there's a chasm we have to get through. When you look at housing valuations, you look at stock market valuations, investors are looking across the chasm and beyond to an economy that will essentially restore the economic activity that's been lost, however different the form it seems likely now to take. But the whole point is to narrow the duration of that chasm, however deep it was, to keep it from stretching out. And of course, the problem right now here in Hawaii is that we were in New Zealand at the end of May. We had like 0 cases. We had bragging rights better than any in the entire United States at that moment. The last time I checked, Vietnam with 95 million people has had 7 deaths.
Total, yeah.
So, so there are places, Taiwan, South Korea, much of East Asia, and
most of those places you see good mask adoption.
You have the whole pattern of socially cohesive cultures that are willing to embrace uniform adoption of prophylactic measures such as mask wearing, but have also undertaken much more.
They don't have a federal response? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they have a national response. They actually have a national response, and they have here's another thing we're missing. This is really important in Hawaii, right? You have to have the same rule when you get on the airplane that you have when you get off the airplane, right? That's how the TSA works. And so, at some point we'll get rapid testing. FDA just approved a rapid testing alternative, and there are more. Ocean IT right here in Honolulu, downtown Honolulu, a bunch of tech engineer guys have produced it's a spit test, right? It's like a pregnancy test from Longest Drugs. So we'll get there in the next several months, or it's not as accurate, but if everybody takes it that gets off of the airplane, or if everybody takes it before they go to work on Monday, then you'll knock down a lot of what's happening. You'll just get it by volume. That's right. A couple people will slip through, but at least with proper management, you can contain that. And that's what you also see in these other countries. Massive contact tracing initiatives, and you see these, smartphone based, right? Google knows where you are. Why doesn't the Department of Health, right? So that kind of stuff.
Well, what's with our early success? We saw our numbers decline so dramatically, so quickly. We never really had it, even though we're the most, we are geographically isolated, but we have travelers from all over the world. So I would assume we're
but that went to zero. Well, two things. Number one, it went to zero. By the way, and it went to zero before the quarantine came in. So people's behavior changed. But second, Well, it was all returning residents, you know. It wasn't even the tourists. It was returning residents. Came back from Seattle or Las Vegas or the Pacific Princess. And once that initial injection of the coronavirus into our community, and, you know, I'm not blaming anybody, through no fault of their own, people happened to bring it back with them. Once that burned through and we mitigated by not going out to eat or whatever we did for 2 months, the coronavirus didn't have anywhere to go. And so the transmission rate, right, RT got very low. Well, right now, RT in Hawaii is back up. It's the highest in the country. And so getting together with your family and doing all the stuff, you're going to church or whatever, you know, heading down for the barbecue at the beach. Unfortunately, over the course of the summer, that's caused reignition of the coronavirus. And now Hawaii is worse than Italy in March. Yeah. Think about that for a second.
Million mark, right?
So,
hey,
well, you know,
didn't hit Arizona though. We were 500.
We will in 3 weeks if it keeps going. Yeah, we will by Labor Day, and that's the challenge. You don't want to be New York in April. You don't want to be Arizona in July.
That, I mean, from the beginning, we've always said 2 weeks to flatten the curve. You know, that's why people come here and they're supposed to quarantine for 2 weeks. When we did our thing last time, it was supposed to be for 2 weeks. And then to me, we should have opened up immediately, you know, within 30 days at the very worst. Instead, it dragged on and on and on, and we were so scared to open. Now we're starting to see this. We're scared to close back up. We should be more quick with our response. If we could just shut as a warning and signaling to the rest of the islands that, hey, this is a danger we're in. We need to shut down for 2 weeks. That way we don't have to wait and wait. The longer we wait, the bigger the economic impact, the bigger the social impact and the number of infections, and the longer we have to break. So to me, we should have done 2 weeks 2 weeks ago, and then we wouldn't have to do 28 days, who knows, starting tomorrow with the number of infections that we've had today.
And that's what you see in these successful places. When something shows up, they swarm on it so hard, right? They shut things down so quickly that it, you know, contains the hotspot or whatever the situation is.
And we're seeing cluster infections now.
There's another aspect of this, by the way, is we simply don't really yet have good tourism and air travel protocols. The problem with the best way to do it, which is to test everybody that gets off the plane. You know, test everybody that gets off a plane, and then have them take a specially set up Uber or Lyft, right? No tour buses. Take them directly to their room. You know, wait out a short incubation period, depending on their test results, and then follow up and, you know, do all the bubble whatever management. Yeah, sure. Well, we're at that point now. Not
popular with people though.
I'm just saying there is a way to ease back in without everybody running amok across the island. But it starts with the screening and the testing from the moment people disembark the airplane, and ideally before they get on. But we're a destination. We can't control what happens where they get on the airplane, unfortunately. Again, to your point about a national response, if we had a national protocol for air travel that involves pre-boarding rapid testing, along with the other prophylactic measures like mask wearing, and you know, sanitizing the aircraft, and then proper hygiene and all that other stuff, you know, we could actually get there. But it's not cheap. It's costly. It's costly to use a PCR test to test everybody. The rapid testing will be cheaper, not as accurate. Anyway, we're going to get to a protocol that allows Maui to restore its tourism. Unfortunately, we missed the summer, and partly we shot ourselves in the foot. And now we're a dangerous destination. That's on us. But we have a shot at restoring the opportunity. Maybe not first mover advantage, but, you know, the opportunity to get things in place before the winter travel season.
Yeah. So, out of curiosity, show us some numbers. What have you seen happen since March? And how are we, you know, starting the recovery process now?
Well, the main one that's problematic right now is this one, which is our case count. So, I mean, what are you going to do? And as I
it
say,
was so good in the beginning.
we were in such good shape at the end of May. I mean, we totally had bragging rights. Hawaii was New Zealand at the end of May. But okay, that was then. To quote a famous epidemiological scientist, it is what it is. So now we have a situation where Hawaii is worse than Italy back in March. And of course, that's not as bad as New York and the Sun Belt was back in the spring in the case of New York, and over the course of the summer in some of these Sun Belt states. But we don't want to get there. And
we haven't hit any of the peaks of California, Arizona,
well, and we're not turning yet. So the danger is that we could get there before anybody really realizes it. And then in terms of recovery, it was supposed to look like let me slide forward to an illustration that'll help us visualize that. As recently as June, these are US GDP growth rates. But it's pertinent for Hawaii, right? The growth rate used to be about 2%, and then it was minus 30% in the second quarter at an annualized rate. But of course, we're supposed to be digging our way out of the hole. So the growth rate goes from minus 30 to plus, let's call it plus 10, because you go down 30%, but then this quarter we should only be down 20%, which is, let's say, 10% higher in round numbers, and we climb out. We climb out of the hole over the course of the next 4 quarters, and by next summer, or maybe another year, maybe 2 years, we're back where we started or in proximity to where we started. And unfortunately, what's happened this summer is leading to something like this, where, again, if you take the June forecast for 9% growth in the third quarter and consider what's happened in so many states across the South and the Southwest, and now is starting to happen in Hawaii. We hope we can tamp it down. It just delays all of that recovery we're hoping for and pushes down that third quarter performance into a situation which prolongs the pain and delays that ultimate breakout. Now, again, there's a vaccine out there somewhere, let's say by next summer. Really, the work for us right now is to get something rolling with sufficiently reliably credible safety protocols in place so that we don't have to keep doing this for the next 12 months. We get something rolling. We don't have we don't have the Groundhog Day recovery where every 90 days we wake up and we start over from scratch.
Yeah. And I've seen, that's one of the things that's very frustrating is getting accurate numbers of when there will be a vaccine, because everything that I've read says it'll be coming in 18 months for the last 5 months. So
yeah, I think the way to think about so this is a really important point, Clint. A good example is we have this moving reopening date for tourism. Okay, the quarantine is going to be lifted on August 1st. Like you called the psychic hotline and they told you August 1st is the date, and then it's September 1st, and now it's October 1st. And this is what in economic policy we call this discretionary policy, where we rely on the omniscient, glorious leadership of our, governor or whomever to pick a date. Pick a date. And no, it's not October 1st. It's October 2nd at 2:35 in the afternoon. By divine revelation, I know the date and time. Instead, this rules-based policymaking sets thresholds like 50 cases per million, right? We're at 200. When you get below 250 cases per million, this is how Germany does it. When you get below 50 cases per million, you're back on our travel list. Spain just broke out above that, and Germany said, hey, you know what? People from Germany can't go to Spain anymore. Because what was happening is they went to Spain, which is having a flare-up, probably because of travel and tourism, and now the German tourists are bringing it back to Germany. So yeah, we don't want to have to keep doing the Groundhog Day thing, and the way to do that is to set thresholds that people familiarize themselves with, and over time can gauge for themselves: is their behavior improving the outcome enough so that we can reopen? Here's a Here's one from the, let's see, where is the data I'm trying to find? Let me show you something I mentioned earlier, the so-called transmission rate, or the RT.
Mhm.
Well, so here you can just go to rt.live and download the Hawaii data. And this is Hawaii's number, 1.2. As of yesterday or 2 days ago, that was the worst in the country. Okay, so if you're RT, you could put that on the list of things that has to happen. RT has to go down to where it was in April, 0.8, 0.6. That means that each person is transmitting to less than one other person, the novel coronavirus that's, going around. I'm just suggesting you should have, a dashboard or a handful of critical indicators, or some combination of values and patterns over time, 2 weeks or 3 weeks of continuous improvement in something or other. And then we can all plan, right? Businesses can plan, investors can strategize about when it's likely that we'll hit the targets and then be able to reopen or mitigate. If maybe we don't get to 1 case per million, as some of these places are, and we stay at 20, well, maybe we can manage the resort in a way that, notwithstanding the fact that there's latent risk in the resident population, the resort itself has taken the necessary steps to ensure that workers entering the resort are not exposed, and that the visitors who come and stay there are neither a source of transmission back into the community, nor potentially victims.
Cruise ship style employment, basically. You put them in there, and they're
Cruise ships with everybody gets tested every day, something like
That's
that.
how it is. They would come, at least how the bubble's supposed to work, is employees would come in for 5-day shifts. They would live and stay at the hotel, and then they would be back home after that point. So they're isolated.
It's really interesting you say that. If you go look at the Sheraton Waikiki, we've all been there. As you enter the main foyer or whatever, the Port Corsair, and the main reception area of the Sheraton Waikiki, built in 1970, I want to say, over on the right, it's leased out now to Japanese tour companies and whatnot, but over on the right is the housekeeping dorm. There's a building that used to be where the housekeeping staff lived while they were on duty. If you go to Castle Hospital, right behind where I live, if you go in the back of the hospital, you go to look, if you're giving birth, mom, go try to look downstairs, and there's a little building in the back, a little apartment building. Brother, that's the old nurse's dorm. So anyway, it's for reasons we don't want to talk about. We don't have to do that anymore. The nurses don't have to live there anymore, and they're not all women. But I mean, there was a time when that is how some of these operations actually conducted business. And which brings up a whole nother subject. Are we going to dine out the same way we did before? Are we going to go to the shopping mall the same way we did before? I'm thinking a bunch of those changes, which we think, are we going to go to the office to work the way we did before? I'm thinking about, are we going to go have a business luncheon and I do a PowerPoint slideshow on a bad screen with a projector that can't defeat the sunlight coming in from the outside? I mean, we're going to fly to Kahului to go to some golf club to do, no, bro, we're going to Zoom that sucker. I'm going to show you the slides on the screen right now. So a bunch of these changes that we think are temporary might turn out to be permanent. And from a real estate investment standpoint, people ought to be contemplating what those might be, certainly in commercial real estate. But the whole question,
inquiry increase in the number of people who would be working remotely. The big thing is people aren't going to buy something unless they can actually put their feet in it, and they can't come here unless they're going to be quarantined for 14 days. And some people have actually thought that, I'll just rent a place for a month and I'll stay here. But we have specific legislation in place that says if you're going to come here and you're going to rent to or your place, if you're an owner of a condo and you rent to somebody for 2 weeks and they're quarantining from the mainland, can't rent for 6 months to anybody else after that. That's it. So people who had the idea of coming to a place and quarantining, and then they were going to go and, you know, after the 14 days, go search for a place or whatnot, that's it.
Is that like a Maui rule?
Anymore.
Is that like
Yeah, it is.
Thou shalt not prosper on Maui, because we intend to make it impossible for you to earn a living?
Well, there's actually people, you know, that were in escrow or that are in escrow on the island right now. They've come here, they've done the 14-day quarantine. They're staying in a place that they're renting for 6 months in a row, you know, reduced rate, not a nightly. And they've actually bought something sight unseen while they were here. And now they're going and they're looking around at other potential properties on the island and, you know, getting a feel for where they want to live, because so many people can work remotely. And Maui, in our opinion, is the best place on the planet. I mean, perfect weather year round. It doesn't get too hot. It doesn't get too cold. There's the tropical environment, whether you want more deserty, whether you want more foresty, whether you want to be, you know, like the Paniolo's and upcountry and, you know, have ranch land. There's a lot of different options out there for people, and they're, you know, emigrating in mass away from large cities, because we're getting a lot of these inquiry from high density population areas, you know, New York, the center of LA, you name it. And the thing is, those inquiries start, they come in to look at the process of coming out here. They don't, you know, even the people that don't mind the 14 days, they can't do it. Nobody's going to run to them, because everybody is on this false sense of understanding that, oh, you know, come December, people will open up, they'll open things back up, everything's going to be okay. But like, you know, we're saying, it's most likely not going to be until there's a vaccine, and that's not going to be coming till, you know, February, March, April, sometime about then. And if you rent to somebody for 6 months, then that's going to cover that empty space. But people are so hopeful that there's going to be another option out there and they can return to more normalcy. But unfortunately, everything that I look at, the realistic view, says that while our numbers are maintaining, money's cheap. We were only seeing slight declines in real estate values for condos, you know, increases in more affordable homes, and slight decreases in higher end homes. That's going to stay like that, to slightly declining up until things open up. And my big concern is we're going to see a massive shot. I mean, I have so many people that are, oh, I'll wait until I get here. I'll wait until I get here. I'll wait until I get here. And there's not a lot of inventory. There just isn't. And you know, when inventory shrinks, prices go up. And California, what has it gone up? 20% since, you know, January? And we normally follow, but we haven't been because of this, you know, artificial barrier of entry. So it's a good opportunity for people who see and know our history, but I'm really hesitant about the way that things are currently going. I mean, it seems to be, we need to be less reactionary and more on top of it. 2 weeks to flatten the curve is an easy concept and something we were saying in the beginning, but we never seem to follow that. We should have closed 2 weeks ago and be opening up right now, and instead we're reactionary. So
I'm curious to hear, Rita, if if you're seeing a pattern in the title company world of this, you know, the shift in, you know, what deals are closing, what kinds of units, because I keep listening for tidbits of information. The hints that Clint was suggesting are out there, where people are starting to maybe move away from dense urban areas or look to the appeal of remotely working as a driver of demand for housing on places like Maui.
So what we're finding on Maui here for title and escrow, first and foremost, to go back with Facebook and Google and all these big companies saying stay home, you can work out of even Fidelity. I'm in sales still at a stay home. And so that is going to change. And what we're finding, we're finding more cash buyers. We're finding people coming from the mainland. And I would love to just share what we have seen, and please feel free to jump in. I think most every graph that we have looked at since March has a certain fall. So of course it was March 13th, Clint? And so the pendings are green, the blue is sold, and this is since January of last year. And so what we have seen is this great fall. At Fidelity statewide in April, we had 27% of our deals cancel statewide.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what happened in March and the uptick, because we are finding a lot of people coming from the mainland who want to get away, and we hear it, principals and also other agents. But what we've seen since March is this uptick, this beautiful U recovery. And I've literally willed this thing, Paul, with more and more escrows. And for the first 17 days of August, just to let you know, on Maui, we have put in 80% as a whole island, 80% of the same number of deals, 206, I think 165 pending so far. So what we found is absolute shutdown. And that you see this in the stock market, the same little stock market is exactly the same curve, which look at the S&P making a record this week. And of course, we know with investors, when they feel as though they have more money, people spend more money. And so this is what's happened on Maui. What I think is interesting on Maui that's happened is after the first quarter, so home sales accounted for 36% of the deals, okay? And then condo sales were 59. And of course, that's like a lot of West Side, mostly South Side. Through July, 36% of the home sales has now increased to 40%. So that's a 4% increase from the number of homes that closed the first quarter versus now. And the condo sales dropped from 59% of the deals that happened on Maui is now 54%.
Keep talking, Rita. I'm going to share screen to validate everything you just said. This is statewide, Oahu and neighbor islands.
Right.
That same rebound.
That same drop.
Yeah.
But here on Maui, and I don't know what the other islands are doing, we have found more homes are selling. And we are finding more people coming in, buying sight unseen, doing their inspections via FaceTime, etc. And it's so interesting here on Maui. It's always been historically, South Maui is always the number one. 1/3 of the deals happen in South Maui. And we're finding a 2% increase of home sales, an increase in market share for Central because of the homes.
The other thing you showed is that the what was the green line in your data? Pendings. So the pendings lead closings by 2 months. These are closings.
Yes.
So your increase in pendings says that for next 2 months we'll be coming back. Yep. And I guess the interesting question is, do we come back to 100%? Do we end up at 90%? Is it 120%? I mean, what do you say, Clint?
I believe that right now we're at 85%, and then we're
but we're talking about Rita's next 2 months of pendings lead the closings. And so I'm just curious, do you think we get back to par? Do we get full recovery to what we had pre-COVID, or is it higher? Is it lower?
I've talked with so many agents all across Maui, and I'll tell you what I'm feeling and hearing and seeing. There is huge demand for people just to come back, huge demand of buying. I mean, look at our pendings, you guys, with the steep drop and the increase, and of course, sales follows pendings. And again, for the month of August, we're already at 80%, and we have 13 more days or 12 more days left in the month. That to me is encouraging. However, as we all know, median sales prices for homes and condos have both risen in this extended period, and it's taking longer even the median days on market for properties to sell. So it's
that
interesting
could just be transactional hang up. I mean, that could just be transactions costs. I mean, it's tougher to qualify for a mortgage.
Delays. When this started happening, I had a number of transactions that were saying, hey, hold up, let's step back for a little while. I want a 30-day extension. I even had, somebody walk away from a $100,000 deposit, that my buyer got to keep. So, because they were so concerned, they say they're going to come back when things open back up. But I actually already have people looking, and of course, as a realtor, it's astonishing. I see so few people use the virtual tours in order to actually see 3D modeling of the home. I see, the absolute requirement to have a video and professional photography for the home. And then in addition to that, a more hands, approach where you're using an iPhone and presenting the property, because people want to feel like they've been there and they know it, because so many are buying these homes sight unseen, you have to have those tools available. And I'm kind of shocked that I'm seeing less of it, not more of it right now. We've gone away so much away from print advertising and thrown, tens and tens of thousands of dollars into this online, avenue to specifically laser target people that are searching. And then that's giving them that comfortable feeling of purchasing a place sight unseen so that they can come here, stay in it. Mostly people who are already familiar with Hawaii, of course. So,
well, let me provoke both of you with yet another contradiction or challenge. We're talking about sales of both existing and new homes. Here's the production of new homes, and you're both suggesting that demand has been restored, that there's potential, latent potential for even stronger future demand, that there's some structural changes that, ranging from people wanting to come home to Maui to people able and willing to work remotely from Maui, Maui County. Contrast that on the supply side with the trend in production, which understandably in the moment of the current crisis has dropped precipitously, but even on trend for the last several years has been cycling downward. And when I think about the regulatory environment, particularly on the neighbor islands for new home building, it seems to me really challenging that builders and developers could respond if there is a future surge in post-COVID housing demand. It seems challenging to me to believe that builders could respond with sufficient production volumes.
And I don't think it's going to be possible on our island. We have something like a 10,000 home shortfall, and we're not even, producing a fraction of that on an annual basis. So it's unlikely we'll ever be able to sit that, even with our poor attempts to subsidize properties and, and have more affordable. The cost of building is in the land and it's in the entitlement process. And I talk to people with the financial means to do that, to develop, affordable property, but do they really want to spend 15 years and millions of dollars on a project that will probably not get approved? So, people say, hey, we need higher density, cheaper properties in Hawaii, but only going to approve, less density, more expensive ones. And, there's this oxymoronic reaction between what people want and, what we get. And, even to the point where we try to put these retainers and say, hey, if you're going to be building expensive homes you need to build a portion of affordable.
Right.
They rather just give millions of dollars for the county to, put it into other affordable programs. We actually helped start Nahalioma Kena, which is a community land trust on the island here. And it's been working really well. We put the initial seed money into it, and my dad was on the board of that, and have purchased land in order to start that process. And it's shared ownership. And the great part is the majority of people that buy into that eventually trade into the open market. So it's like a leasehold piece of property in which, you're trained and get to know and have a more affordable ownership, and then gives you the opportunity to trade into that open market. And it's been wildly successful. Do I think that's the only solution? Obviously not. But there needs to be more creative programs like that on the island in order to have successful home ownership by local and young families. Most of the people here that own on island are probably above 60 or something, and these young people who are working to the bone, and I say young, I mean, this is, 40s and 50s and they don't own properties here. And it's not until you start seeing that retirement age coming that, people are more willing to trade in. So.
Yeah, I've seen the statewide numbers recently, and roughly a quarter of the population is under the age of 20. Roughly a quarter is between the ages of 20 and 40. That's your prime first-time home buyer age cohort right there. And then another quarter is age 40 to 60, and then another quarter is 60 and over, and they all have homes, right? And what we're really talking about right now is literally that millennial cohort that had some trouble coming out of the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, maybe got a slow start with wealth accumulation, maybe missed the opportunity to build some wealth in the last decade because their employment opportunities initially weren't as great for whatever reason. Here we are a decade later, and the people who were 20 are now 30, and they're taking another hit. We've got to come up with, as you say, the creative opportunities for them to participate, notwithstanding the fact that if you think about this, the way we do mortgages in America and the way we do lending in America, it's pretty accessible, it's pretty democratized. The rules are pretty much the same. Figure out how to get the down payment going, and you can get a pretty low interest loan.
Very
considering what it used to be like, you know what I mean? And there aren't really that many shortcuts there, although you might have to ask, Tutu or, for the help with the down payment. But once you get on the train, once you get on the escalator, right, you're in the equity, and that's the whole thing. But so do we have the housing units?
A portion of it. So of course, in 2008, the subprime crisis happened. They packaged these loans together, and then we had a fundamental failure in the economic system where money wasn't, there wasn't good liquidity, and it made the interest rates go up because you had these big blocks of loans failing simultaneously. Right now, we're not seeing that. I mean, we have some of the best savings. It's like close to 20% of all people, or 20% of the home value is in, the equity of the home. So we're doing really good. But from my understanding, we're safe right now. We started to see some dangers associated with collateralized loan obligations. So those are the business blocks,
Right, right.
And, we're seeing GNC failures. We're seeing large, chains of workout facilities failing. We're seeing these entertainment places like, Chuck E. Cheese closing down.
Sure.
So, as people move to a more, shop at home society or work out at home, and with this crisis happening, it's exacerbating all these economic factors. So last time I talked to you, we were in the recovery phase where we were having much less risk associated with that. Do you happen to know how things are looking right now with those commercial block loans?
Yeah, what I would say, I'll show you another image here. You refer to two distinct problems. One I can think continues to be a challenge. The other, I think we're on top of it. So I know this seems esoteric, but this is the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve System. And I haven't updated it in 2 months, but you can see that it was kind of reaching a level around 7 trillion in assets and 7 trillion in liabilities, where if I were to go find the data now, I'm pretty sure things will have leveled out where they were in mid-June. Essentially above zero, the blue parts of this are the securities that the Fed buys in order to inject liquidity into the system. And that moment you were talking about back in 2008, where the financial crisis was metastasizing, and these particularly risky versions of the mortgage-backed security pools to which you alluded were blowing up. The Fed literally invented these backstopping techniques that it used in 3 waves of quantitative easing over the next 5 or 6 years. And thank goodness. And which in this most recent crisis, and you can see the vertical line there labeled SARS-CoV-2, the Fed immediately began injecting liquidity into the system. So the system itself, the integrity of the system itself, I think is largely intact. The problem that we're going to face is the one, which is the second part of your comment, and I'll give you an illustration of one version of that that's close to home, so to speak, no pun intended. If you look at mortgage delinquency rates right now in Hawaii, they jumped between the first and second quarter by an amount of almost equivalent magnitude to what we saw back in 2008, 2009. Now, 2008, 2009 was a rolling, cancerous, spread of default and a credit risk that was very challenging to contain for a variety of structural reasons, not the least of which is that many of the mortgages that we saw for collateral on Maui or the Big Island and elsewhere were actually originated out of state, involving out of state borrowers and out of state lenders, and nobody knew what was going on with the collateral. So there were some technical issues that made those workouts difficult. Whereas this time, the the delinquencies are part of a deliberate strategy under the CARES Act and under Fed guidance with respect to the commercial banking system to allow people to defer their liabilities temporarily while we work our way through the crisis. And then we're going to have to come up with, a workout at the other end, but it will probably mean some kind of algorithmic restructuring of the amortization and so on. So this time, the system, learning what it did in 2008, 2009, had responded. That still leaves the underlying problem you talked about. There are certain, particularly commercial uses of real estate, like gyms, I'm sorry, and a bunch of restaurants, and maybe even dense resort configurations. I don't know, do I want to be on the 10th floor of a destination resort, or would I rather be in a standalone vacation rental dwelling up in Pukalani? Let me think. So we'll see how it shakes out. We've talked a lot about just the fact that working at home rather than going to a workplace completely changes your perspective on whether the workplace is even needed, but more fundamentally, whether you can't be as or more productive at home. And a company, when a company like Google says, okay, all you's going to stay at home till July 2021, that's Google's commitment. Y'all stay at home until 2021. It means that company is going to learn how to operate that way without a campus. And you need to take heed, because if you're an old line, conventional, come to the office kind of company, you may be a dinosaur. So in the commercial real estate space, let me give you another example. The downtown Honolulu office vacancy rate at full employment at the end of the longest economic expansion in history, right? As good as it gets, the vacancy rate in downtown Honolulu was 10 or 12% last December, partly because of the incredible shrinking cubicle, right? It's not going to go back to 10%. Not everybody's going to go back to their office. So right off the top, I'm doing math. I'm thinking, when things go back to normal a year from now or 2 years from now, it's going to be 20%. The new normal.
In their office space. They're going to
and if you know that now, why would you not convert some of those towers or some of those floors to residential condominiums? Mm-hmm. So these are the kinds of things that real estate professionals, that investors, buyers, people with fiduciary obligations to clients, people who are in a position as intermediaries should be thinking about. A sea change, even a small sea change, right? It's sort of like global climate change. I don't care whether you believe it or not. The ocean is rising, bro. Inch by inch, it's coming inside your backyard. And we're all going to be dealing with it. Well, this is something that we had no idea it was going to happen. And everything that was out of alignment, like the downtown Honolulu office vacancy rate at full employment, at the end of the longest expansion in economic history, right? Everything that was out of alignment before COVID, trust me, after we get back to whatever the normal is, it's going to remain out of anything we would have called alignment pre-COVID. And you might as well just, pardon me, I'm sorry.
They do keep trying to talk about diversifying our economy. The problem is there's only one thing that we can produce here that, and that's pretty much tourism, because the manufacturing portion of it is so expensive with the cost of labor, the cost of land. Bringing that stuff in is not going to make sense. If you work more virtually, like, say the production of movies or, the tech industry, those are two potential avenues that we can work to diversify our economy. But the efforts that they've made have been somewhat half-hearted, at least here on island. We do have a supercomputer that builds up there, but I mean, I've had people that work, DoD budgets, and, they're talking tens of millions of dollars they have in an annual budget they can't spend half of, because they get, talent out of the mainland. They're like, all right, we'll pay for a place for you to stay. We'll get you here. And then what ends up happening is they're like, yes, they get the very first pick of some of the most talented tech people in the world because, hey, it's Maui. Everybody wants to be here.
Right.
And then
for 5 minutes.
They start calling around trying to get a place to stay. And they're like, oh, you're not already on Maui? No, it's not going to happen. Good luck. So they get a call 5 to 10 days later after they make the agreement that they're going to come work on their project. And then they're like, I can't get a place. I only see the possibility of expanding in the tech avenue if we have a live-work environment, an actual big company that come here and is willing to make a live on campus, style of learning, which gives them the perfect opportunity to train local people to diversify a skill set. And until you see a live-work community that they can bring some talent in here to have those projects, and I think it's going to be too difficult because they have empty office space. It's been empty for decades.
What I'm talking about here is what you're saying, only like in Pokemon, the evolved form. So live work just went virtual.
Yeah.
The whole point is you don't have to actually live anywhere. So you don't have to live on Maui to work on Maui. But the flip side is where the potential is. We don't have to work on Maui if we live on Maui, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So this was already true. But what the novel coronavirus has kind of given us this shock, ice bath, and we're all waking up realizing, oh wait, I can use internet to work anywhere. Maybe that's the takeaway as we look down the road a year or two from now. Mm-hmm. Anyway, a lot of change either way, and to your point about diversification as a policy strategy. I tend to turn that on its head, right? Tourism, we're so lucky that we just wake up and we have the ability to do that. So that gives us the opportunity to try everything else. But nobody's going to make it happen. You have to make it happen. You have to make up whatever the new normal is. Yeah. Well, we all start from scratch, right? Yeah. We all start as the junior guy on the staff. So, welcome to our world.
So a little bit more to the local side of it, Maui. Yep. I just wanted to ask Rita, when you're seeing, these call-ins and how many more people, because to me, there are a lot of people, mostly inquiries. I'm getting an unbelievable amount of inquiries that are coming down from the mainland. Just so many people I have to continually stay in contact with and plan and give updates about what's happening on the island. Are they going to get rid of the 14-day? I finally have gotten clients that are like, oh, I'll bite the bullet. I'm going to stay here for 14 days. And I'm trying to help find them that 6-month rental where they can stay somewhere. And they're doing it, and they're listening. They have lots of checks and balances to make sure that they're not, going off and doing whatever they want. But of course, these Instagram people come here on island and they ruin it for everyone. They're like going around, they get off the plane, they give them the information, and then they don't answer their phone, they turn it off, and then they're posting where they are on the island and they're getting arrested. So there are bad actors, there are good people, in the process, and, we got to find that balance in between. So the thing that I find, though, the main people that are actually buying right now are local people, because they're taking advantage of the very, very obscenely low interest rates. They're taking, they have a stable job, there's not a lot of inventory, so they're being very patient because they have this opportunity to look out there for a property to purchase. So you, Rita, you're of course seeing a much broader spectrum. How are you witnessing where people are coming from comparatively?
Well, first off, I think what this time has done, it's really caused people to know that one, life is short. Two, we put off the things that we really want to do in life. And that is why so many people have come to make purchases here. But it's interesting, and I wish you had asked me that an hour ago, because I just downloaded this information for another agent. I was so surprised. I took it from January 1st to, I think it was the end of July. And if my memory serves me, I want to say about 70% of the transactions. And the one way that we gauge it is where the real property tax bill is sent. versus the site versus the mailing was in state. So there was so many transactions from Maui that's happened with people, as you just said, Clint, in state, people buying and selling. And if you don't mind, I would love to just share my screen again, Paul, because I think I want to give you just some more of like the details of what's happened. So this is what's happened with COVID, the second quarter comparison. So in thinking about this, it's like, okay, it happened in March, but it's April, May, June. How did we compare to last April, May, June? And just for as an island, so that you know, down 34% of home sales. We know this. We know that everything has been down as far as sales, but the real areas that have been really affected, interestingly enough, is West Side and the South Maui side. In comparison, and Central, as I said, an increase of market share of all the homes, and most of those homes in the last 3 months of the second quarter were project sales, which goes to your inventory comment of how are we going to do it? We don't have that many projects in the books. I know there are a couple more, or a couple of filed permits down here in South Maui, and then the condo sales. Okay, so as a whole island, 50%. So second quarter, down 50% on the condo sales. Now look at this. I mean, that South Maui, Clint, I mean, here, almost 60%. So,
and it's hilarious. The number of actual price for the condo is literally eking up, increasing. How do you have a price increase with volume dropping? Like, to me, it boggles my mind. I don't understand it.
Well, so much boggles my mind these days. Like the stock market boggles my mind. I mean, with earnings, consumption, I just don't get why it's up.
People aren't having discretionary spending, and then instead they're like, well, I'm going to save money. I'm going to put it into the stock market, because the stock market, when have you ever seen it not break records? When? If it goes and it drops and it's the lowest you've seen it, if you have a 30% drop, blood in the streets, start buying. There was a lot of blood, and people had extra money on their hands because they stopped spending, they stopped traveling, all their travel plans were kaput. And then they started pouring money in, a lot of small investors. And the big investors, you know, Merrill Lynch and all them, they're like, what are you guys doing? We're supposed to be dropping. What, if you're at your own risk, what are you investing in? But they're not, people get it. They're like, look, it's a bull market. Yeah, it's dropped and we're in a bad time right now. But what else am I going to do with my money? I'm not going to be going
Everybody
to Hawaii.
trading on Robinhood, Rita.
Yes, exactly, Robinhood.
You know, my rule of thumb is buy the second bounce, never buy the first bounce. And this time there was no second bounce, so I missed it.
It's fascinating when you see the earnings, though. I mean, it is, to me, fascinating. All these little illustrations of the down up at the stock market.
Yeah.
Pratt went back up, and S&P again this week.
You have to be careful. All that says right now is the winners and losers are average, you know, are negating each other. So there's some serious losers, and then there are some big winners. Both with housing and with the stock market, what's reassuring is that at the end of the day, investors are looking out, you know, for the rest of time, or if the house is going to live longer than you do, right? And you look at the value of a house or a value of corporate equity investments, and in the long run, it's all good. It's just this one interval of 6 to 12 months that's just hammering us, and that all came in at the front end in terms of values in stocks and in terms of sales volume in the housing market, but not values. Your conundrum, Clint, down in the South Maui condo market is that the high-end condos are still selling. It's the low-end condos that disappeared. So perversely, the average price or the median price is higher, even though there's been this huge dropout. That dropout will come back as the low-end investors, find the confidence that if you're a high-end investor, you're kind of like, I'm sorry, I'm too rich to worry, and that's why somebody needs to slap my head. And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about guys I will never be, and they all need a slap in the head. But yeah, their problems, the problems of the wealthy, are not the problems of the rest of us. So
I see. How long though? I have a question for you, Paul. How long can these short-term vacation owners go for without any income?
I wanted to come back to this. I bit my tongue before, and now I'm going to take on Maui. even before the coronavirus, all this BS about, we don't want vacation rentals. It's just BS, you guys. The world has changed. Let me give you an example. After Hurricane Iniki, all the what you call timeshare haters were in charge on the island of Kauai. We don't want timeshare. We want the hotels to come back and rebuild their property. And we're all like, why the F would a hotel rebuild its building after it got blown up twice by a hurricane in the same spot on your island? Those buckets are never going to build another hotel unless they can sell the rooms. You see what I mean? Now, I can sell the room as a condo, in which case it's going to cost $2 million to sell that hotel room. Or I can sell 50 weeks use of that. I can sell the individual weeks, and then I break down the $2 million into $50,000 pieces, and we all make money. So timeshare happened because of a shock to the economy that led to financial innovation and so from 50% of the rooms on Kauai being hotel, 40% condos, we went to 20%. What is it now? It's 20% vacation rental, 30% timeshare, 30% hotel room, and 20% condo on Kauai. So structure on Kauai, the structure of the industry changed. And this is another one of those shocks. Now, we went into this shock. You think it's bad on Oahu, on Maui, bro. On Oahu, 1 year ago, bro. 1 year ago, people said, oh, you know, the prohibition of vacation rentals we put in place in 1989, 30 years ago?
30 years
We're going to enforce it now for two reasons. One, prohibition always works. And number two, I still listen to the same music I did in 1989. Those are two lame reasons for public policy of any kind. A, prohibition never works. And B, that means okay, let's just, the world has changed, okay? And right now, I mean, 91. Sure, I still listen to Stevie Ray Vaughan. Look, the economy has experienced a massive shock, and all the changes that were in place in the last 5 or 10 years are being accelerated by the shock. They're not gonna, this is how you book a lodging unit. This is how you rent a lodging unit. Your name doesn't have to be Marriott. Your name doesn't have to be, you don't have to have 1,000 rooms in Wailea Resort, right? You just have the house your grandmother left when she died 10 years ago. And now I'm thinking I'll use a hosting app and make a vacation rental. So either you accept that the world has changed, or you're old and in the way. And eventually you're dead too. And then the kids can go do what they did on Kauai 30 years ago, which is say, fine, another hurricane, let's just do timeshare. I'm telling you, you can, resistance is futile, prepare to be assimilated.
Clint, can I just correct my answer? I just want to, because while you were talking, I looked this up actually. So since January, 59% of the transactions happen within Hawaii, owner, resident to resident, and so 41%, of course, out of island, and 15% of that was California, and then next state, 5% Washington.
Okay.
So.
All right. Hey, thank you so much for both joining me. I really appreciate the education and information, and yay to a new radio show. It'll be interesting times coming up dealing with this second wave, and hopefully we'll have a good, proper, metered response. But until we know the facts, I'll be waiting to shoot this online. So my number, of course, is 808-280-2764. If anybody wants to shoot me a text or have a question or want to see property. But if you want to see this or any other broadcasts, go to MauiRealEstateRadio.com. And we are right now also broadcasting on the KAOI radio group, 1110 AM KAOI, and broadcasting on 96.7 FM, 98.7 FM, and our friends on the west side at 95.5 FM. So thank you guys. Have a great evening and aloha or morning.
Okay, remain well.
Aloha,
Bye, guys.
Rita.